G'day everyone, I'm Smokescreen and welcome back to another video, and here we go with round 2 of Nations Cup. I of course missed round 1, I was not able to do it unfortunately. It's quite an interesting combination too, the go-karts at Maggiore Centre, but we weren't able to do that one, so we join with round 2 here. Group 1, as you can see by some of the cars here, and we're actually at Circuit des Spa-Francorchamps for this Group 1 race here. Now, you could use all the Group 1 cars, but really the LMP1 cars were the ones you'd want to go for. A couple of different choices, and each car has pros and cons, but we'll just go through the qualifying lap for now as we come out of the pits for our outlap. Soft tyres for qualifying as we exit the pits here. Right, so coming up the back straight, this is still on the outlap, and you can see I've got a bit of a technique going. I'm lightly dabbing the brake, so I'm overlaying full throttle and maybe, what's that, 25% brake? This is to charge up the hybrid, so the car I'm driving, the Audi R18, has a battery as well as the engine, the normal internal combustion engine. So to charge up that battery and get us the best amount of acceleration for our qualifying lap, we charge that up to 100% by dragging the brake. It's basically a KERS system, but we'll just go through a lap guide. It's coming up to turn 1. It's just the 100 meter board, so braking down into first gear, get that rotation, and first gear there's not too much oversteer. The oversteer comes in second gear if the car doesn't burst in understeer, which it can do. As we come up through Eau Rouge and Radeon, easily flat in these cars of course, you're basically looking to keep an apex speed or minimum speed through Eau Rouge and Radeon of about 285 kilometers an hour. A good run would be 290. Coming up towards the Com chicane, looking on the left hand side, it's just on the start of the curb. Third gear, and you can chuck the car in so early. It's got a lot of grip on these soft tyres, and then it's just basically just balancing the throttle all through the com, and a slight lift on that last one. Coming down into the hairpin, just on the start of the curb on the left again. Coming down through the hairpin of Rivage, and then coming into what was previously called No Name Corner. It is now Jackie X Corner. It's basically just a lift off and turn in. You can probably dab the brakes a little bit. Pouon is just down one gear into fourth on just after the 50 meter board on the right, and then just accelerate all the way through there, and then coming into the Fugner chicane, just braking on the start of the curb on the left again. Third gear, nice and tight through the first part, turn 12 to get a better run through 13, slightly wide but not to worry, and then coming down into Campus just on the start of the curb on the left again. Coming through here, flat out through Stavelot, and then up through the Courbe Paul Frere straight. So of course we have Blanchimont coming up, once again easily flat in these Group 1 cars here. So we're coming through there now, just basically minimise the tyre scrub, and then coming into the bus stop chicane. It's just after the 150 meter board, and then second gear, actually first gear we choose, slightly deep, but it's not to worry, and we're actually a little bit too tight on the exit, so we messed up the chicane a little bit, but that qualifying run is of 156.0, and we'll see that puts us provisional second, and we'll see shortly where that puts us on the grid. And I think there is a blue car inhabiting second position. Of course, saying I think, I already know what happens. Yeah, I qualify in second. Nobody got me. Right, so now it's just a standing start with false start check. So traction control on 1, handbrake on, hold that handbrake and wait for the 5 lights to go out. And we slightly jump it. I absolutely make a hash of the start and get like 3 stabs. Get completely swamped. And then coming through turn 1, someone comes in with a massive dive bomb, and we just receive a hit, and yep, completely rotated at the first turn. So that's basically the race down the toilet. So not great. It's just a racing incident. No one really made any big errors, but unfortunately lose a lot of time. You lose a lot more time from binning it at the start rather than starting at the back. But this starts what was a pretty massive drive. So what I'm going to do is tell you to sit back and enjoy. So there we go. We got up into 7th. After binning it from the back, up into 7th, fastest lap, and 9.7 seconds off the lead. So we didn't really lose time after that one. But there we go. 7th position, 193 points. I was not satisfied. I did go again. But we did get the fastest lap. So it just goes to show maybe I really could have been contending for podium position. Maybe even 2nd. Or dare I say 1st. Because I remained fairly on the pace with 1st position throughout that whole race. At the start, just after I binned it, I was just about 9 seconds off the lead, and I was 9.4 at the end. So, yeah, look, it definitely would have been pretty close to a victory, so it was quite frustrating. I obviously had to go again, and I'm actually in top split this time, so the people that did well in the first slot are now not going, and we are now promoted into the 10th rated spot of top split. Right, so I was doing a lot of practice for this. I did maybe 5 or 6 practice races in open lobbies, but as we're charging up our battery here, we don't want to get a tote. We don't want to get any slipstream for this lap, because through that middle sector you lose a lot of time. And then coming to start this lap, someone thinks I'm leaving the door open, but I'm just getting a straight run. But we're going to start this qualifying lap. But yeah, as I was saying, I did a lot of practice races, and what actually turned out is I got hybrid saving pretty much down pat. I was able to keep the battery, or some of the battery, for all of the race. 100% of the race distance, I did not run out of the battery. I was able to do that, and that really puts you on the front foot, because there's a lot of different cars for choice here. So you got the Audi R18 for outright pace. That's the number 1 car, but the key, you have to hybrid save. You have to drag that brake coming into corners, as we discussed earlier. We'll discuss it a little bit more later. But you have to drag the brake, so you have to hybrid save to use the Audi R18. The other option is the Toyota TS050. No hybrid saving required, but its hybrid charges differently, and it's not as aggressive. It's not as... you don't get as much power from it. So if you don't want a hybrid save, you are still at a little bit of a disadvantage, but if you go for the TS050, it's not too bad. The other choice is the Peugeot 908, a non-hybrid alternative. Very high top speed, so you'll lose out on corner exit, but you'll gain it back at the end of the straight. So for those who do not even want to touch the hybrid, Peugeot 908. But we're finishing up this qualifying lap now, and it was actually quite a solid lap. I was quite happy with this one, and we used our hybrid very well. But coming up here, you can see we were catching up to this car, Schnickerman. He's way up the road, so I looked at it at this point. I was like, oh, that's not going to be an issue. But then coming into the chicane here, I brake really, really late, and that is what I did. And you can see I almost made the corner, but I just had to avoid Schnickerman, who was right where I wanted to be as I was coming into that corner, and it just really threw me off. I was not able to complete that lap, so I decided we'll go again, but I've got no hybrid. And then coming through Pouon this time, look at that, minimum apex speed of 215 kilometers an hour in the dirty air. I made a mistake on my previous lap, and my minimum apex speed was still higher at about 221 kilometers an hour. We come across the line, and we're absolutely nowhere. We're down in 15th. We've just been bumped down into 16th, and on the final grid here, 17th. So, bit of a disaster. But just for now, let's enjoy the Nations Cup introduction, and we'll discuss the strategy after. Lovely as always, we made ourselves on the grid. Right, so we're starting at the back, And there was actually a strategy for this race. I didn't discuss it at all or even present it to you in the previous race because it was pretty much a write-off, but we'll discuss it in a lot more depth in this race here. So, obviously we're starting at the back. There's actually all 3 tyres, Racing Hard, Racing Medium, Racing Soft tyres, all available for this race. The only mandated tyre is the Racing Hard. Now, the interesting thing, we know the pit stops have been drastically lengthened, so you would normally think, well, let's minimise the amount of pit stops as possible. We'll actually just talk about the start. So we're on the inside this time. We managed to get up the inside of a lot of cars here, and a couple of people go deep there. So we go from 17th up into 11th in one corner. We just turn off the traction control from the start of the race. But that's a very, very good gain there. So 17th up into 11th. Now, we start on the hard tyre, of course. So normally you would try and minimise the amount of pit stops possible. Just try and bring that down to the lowest number of pit stops, which is normally at 0. You normally go for a no stop if it's possible. But the tyre wear multiplier for this race is only ×1. So you've only got your standard level of tyre wear that you would in real life, or as best modelled as possible in this game. So what actually turned out is the soft tyres were very, very, very quick for all of their stint, and they could last forever. You could easily do way more than the race distance on just one set of soft tyres, but the hard tyres are mandated, so you have to use those for at least one. So what was the strategy here is a one stop and a no stop were basically the same pace, and as long as you don't get held up during that one stop pit, it's the same pace. So what I did was one stop, so I was doing a one stop race. You can do a no stop and do 13 laps on hard tyres, and it just about comes out even with the one stoppers. But what happened is that the soft tyres were able to last a long time, and there was basically very little tyre degradation, and we're using fuel as well. It's also not an issue, but as the car lightens, the tyre wear drops and it basically evens out, and you're able to keep the same pace on the soft tyres for the entire duration of the stint, which is 12 laps. But I was starting at the back, so I want to get my hard tyre stint out of the way. There's no way I can gain and fight through all these cars at the start of the race, which are so close together and bunched up from the start. That would just waste my soft tyres. So I started on the hards, got my hard lap out of the way, came into the pits, and we can see how long it takes. I mean, I'm going to say it every time, basically, aren't I? But look at that, 24, 25. By the time we stop, it's about 27 seconds it takes from pit entry to drive into the pit box, and it's so unrealistic. I mean, the front straight, which is the length of the pit lane at Spa, isn't really that long. There's no way it would take someone 30 seconds to travel halfway down the pit lane here. But we come out of the pits in 12th, and we've on our soft tyres, we've got our poor tyre out of the way. I mean, we can see we're 34 seconds off the lead here, but at least I'm on the soft tyre. Those front runners are going to be on the soft tyre as well, and they're going to be quicker than me because they're the top drivers of the region. But I have my soft tyre. I can basically just go flat out. There's no need to tyre save at all. There's no need to fuel save in this car at all. The only bit of strategy involved is that hybrid. So we discussed briefly earlier how that works, but basically it's an electronic aid, just like a Formula 1 car. So you've got your normal engine in this Audi R18 from 2016 that I'm driving. I think it's a diesel engine. Driving with that, but then in addition, there's a battery pack. I don't know exactly, I think it's lithium-ion batteries in the real-life car, so I'd imagine they're trying to model that here. And that just deploys at a certain throttle percentage as long as you've got less than a certain steering angle. It's a bit weird. I don't really understand exactly when it calculates the deployment, but the deployment nevertheless is automatic. I don't have to press a button, it just deploys automatically on corner exit, and it gives you absolutely breakneck acceleration. So the point of this race is to try and keep that up as much as possible. So we want to keep quite a high hybrid because we want to use it to the max. So on corner exit it will engage, and once you reach a certain speed it will stop. Around about the end of 4th gear it will stop deploying that hybrid, and it doesn't use a whole battery on one corner exit, but over the course of a lap here at Spa it does use more than one battery. So what you've got to do is try and charge it up a little bit more, and the way it charges in this car is under brakes. So I mentioned briefly it's like a curve system. I don't know if that's exactly what it is, but it acts like one. So kinetic energy recovery system. Formula 1 cars have it. Basically it recovers kinetic energy from braking, and feeds it back into the battery, so it recharges under braking basically. It takes power from braking, or, well, I don't know, some kind of energy dispersed through braking. It captures it and pushes it into a battery. So we want to extend our braking, and the way we do that is by literally extending the braking zone, but we don't want to start slowing down 300 meters before the corner, which is about 200 meters earlier than we normally have to in this car. So we keep the throttle on 100% and just start dragging that brake. Like, it's not much, it's like less than 5% braking, and you do stop accelerating, but if you do it late enough down the straight, you can keep a constant speed. So you can normally keep about 300 kilometers an hour at the end of the Kemmel Straight and after Blanchimont. So just dragging that wherever we can, and it was actually really helping me into Pouhon, because the nose dips when you put that little bit of brake on, which means you get better turn into Pouhon, and I felt I was able to actually lap quicker just by improving my Pouhon. But of course, by keeping the hybrid up, we have loads for each corner exit, so every single corner where that hybrid is deployed, we get the full benefit of that, and that is the key to driving this car, and that was what you need to be able to do in order for the Audi R18 to be the best race car for this particular race here. Now, the Toyota TS050 is the alternative. It doesn't run out hybrid at all because it charges differently. I think it charges at the end of the straights. When you reach your top speed, you don't have to touch the brake. That was actually better if you did not want to try this dragging brake technique. But as we finish up this lap, you can see we've started our soft stint. We've caught up to Ranger Oz quite a lot. We're about 1.5 seconds behind him. And on the exit of this, have a look at my hybrid there. Now, we skip ahead a little bit. I wasn't able to catch up to Ranger Oz because he soon got into the slipstream of Aussie Hypnotic, but he caught up to the end. Sorry, he caught up to Aussie Hypnotic at the end of the back straight, just after Blanchimont. And what has happened now is they're now fighting together, and I've caught up to the pair of them, and we've seen that I'm quite quick, actually. I just happen to be pretty quick in Group 1. I don't know what it is. Any Group 1 race I seem to be pretty quick, but I go for that gap. That was an ever-closing gap, but I got in there just soon enough, and he saw me just in time to not close that gap further. It was a big risk I took there. He could have easily sandwiched me into the wall. But we get the move on Aussie Hypnotic, and we're now on the outside of Ranger Oz. I do have the position at this point, but he keeps it there, and I just kind of back out. I don't really fight it around the outside there, so it's a very flip-flop flowing section. You don't want to be running side by side, so we're just going to take the opportunity in the slipstream to just charge up our battery a little bit more. So we have the slipstream, which means that when we start dragging our brake, we don't lose quite as much speed, so there is of course an advantage to be gained. Now, the most difficult section in Dirty Air is coming up, so Pouhon and the Fugner chicane is the most difficult section to get right in the slipstream, because you just begin understeering. You just turn and nothing happens because there's no downforce to push the front tyres into the road. You can see we run wide through here, and we just turn in a little bit late. It just throws us off. We were momentarily out of slipstream of Ranger Oz, but we're now back in it, and we're coming up through here. This corner is very, very difficult to get flat out to get right in the Dirty Air. We feathered a couple of times, and we're just out of the slipstream at this point of Ranger. And have a look at that gap. 9/10 of a second it almost is now, but thankfully we have full downforce at least for Blanchimont, and we just begin dragging that brake. Coming into the bus stop chicane, almost actually get flicked off the curb and completely rotated. But coming out onto the main straight, this is a very important recharge. Coming into here, I started, regenerating power very, very early, because what I want is to get a better launch off the corner and get a longer period of hybrid than Ranger, and that should hopefully push me into the slipstream range. And we have a look at the gap to Ranger Oz coming up through Eau Rouge. It just dips into the slipstream range over the top of Radeon. So we're now in slipstream and catching up to Ranger Oz, and who is in turn catching up to Mad Max ORT. So we've got a bit of a deja vu moment. Ranger Oz is now caught up to somebody who helps him down the straights. It does of course translate to Dirty Air, but Ranger Oz can make that time back up in down the straights in the slipstream. So it's going to be very difficult for us to now make a move on Ranger Oz, but hopefully the same thing as previous happens. Hopefully the two ahead begin fighting and I'm able to get both positions on this occasion, but on the exit of Puon there, Mad Max clearly runs out of hybrid or doesn't have the power that Ranger Oz has, and we dive down the inside. We get the superior grip on the apex there, lovely. We get that move done very, very quickly with very minimal time loss, and that is that position gone to Mad Max, who's now behind, up into 10th, and now on the exit of Stavilo here, coming through this flat out section, we are now in the slipstream of Ranger Oz. So we're going to be gaining all the way down this straight. We had a very good hybrid deployment on that particular occasion, and basically what I want at the moment is Ranger Oz to discharge his battery to the point where he doesn't get 100% deployment distance on the exit of La Source, and that should hopefully get me firmly in the slipstream and get me a slingshot past him. But coming through the chicane that time, big hybrid deployment there and a big regen here. Quite a lot of braking for that regen period there coming into turn 1, because I want to make sure I don't run out on the exit here. I want Ranger Oz to run out, which I think he has, because if you have a look, just at the end of that hybrid deployment there, we started to gain like 3/10 in the last half a gear worth of hybrid. You can see he sticks it on the inside, but I do have a lot of overspeed here, and I'm hoping to get this move outright just before we hit the braking zone, and we have. I just move in front of him, just half a car width over to the right, just to move in front of him so he can't slam it up the inside, and that is that position successfully defended. We have a look ahead, eyes for Diego S, 4.2 seconds up the road, so that is the next goal. We're going to be looking forward, and by the end of lap 8, that gap to Diego has dropped to 2.4 seconds, so we are gaining this very, very quickly, and we still have Ranger Oz in the slipstream, so it's going to be... actually, we receive a bit of a tap, actually. I think he wasn't expecting me to slow down so much. I had quite a large regen period there, but unfortunately he runs into the back of me. But that just pushed me a little bit deeper into the corner, which means I was able to get essentially a straighter exit, and it just absolutely slingshot me up the Kemmel Straight. We've dropped him by 2 seconds already, and all the way through that straight bit there, we were gaining up towards Diego. I'm not quite sure what car he's in at this point. I'm not quite close enough to identify, but as we're coming through the Rivage hairpin, you can see how close we are. We're under a second to Diego now, and then coming through Jackie X corner, we begin to get to the point where dirty air becomes an issue. He's running defensive into Puon, I'm not sure why, but we're now in slipstream, so I had a good hybrid deployment on the exit of Jackie X corner, and it just gets me the slingshot all the way through Puon, and then he opens that gap up on the inside, and we absolutely dive down the inside. Well, it wasn't really a dive, I was just about alongside when we hit the braking zone, but I just hit my mark, no contact made, and I made the apex, so absolutely no worries with that move there, and actually, to be fair, quite minimal time loss. So once again, eyes forward. Schickerman was 7 seconds ahead when we made that move on Diego. He's now 4 seconds by the end of lap 11. By the end of lap 10, it would have been, and at the end of lap 11, that gap has closed down to 1.2 seconds. So once again, I'm trying to work on keeping my hybrid up so I can get full deployment on the exit, in hopes that my competitors or the players that I'm directly racing on the track at that particular time run out of hybrid. So I want the other players to run out, and I want myself to have the advantage of 100% deployment, and that is kind of what's happened here, because on the exit of La Source there, that gap is slightly dropping, so maybe he either didn't get as good of an exit, or he did run out of that hybrid slightly early, but by the end of the straight he's actually beginning to gain, so that probably lets me know he's in a different car, although coming through here it does look like the Audi R18, so obviously he probably wasn't recharging his battery. That is probably what it would have been. So coming into the Rivage hairpin once again, we've got right up to the back of Schnickerman at this point, so we've gained 7 seconds on this guy, and you can see we've actually set quite a good lap of 1:56.3, only 1/10 off my previous race fastest lap, and although it is still quite a significant chunk off the back of the fastest lap in this race of 55.4 by Dylan Lindgren. But as we're coming up through Puon this time, he's once again opened the gap up on the inside, so we're going for this move once again. How many times is that in this race? Like 3 times or something? So I was obviously very strong into the Fugner there. And it is now at this point where the leaders go into the pit. So this is where the strategy that I played really pays off for me. So it takes a while to see the benefit of the early hards at the start and the stop early at the start, but by the end of the race, when everyone else who started with their longest soft tyre stint comes into the pits, the idea is that you jump people, and we'll see what happens. We're up into 4th, so we were 7th, I believe, when we started this lap, and then on the exit here, we've jumped up into 5th, so I think that was 2 people. Did we jump 2 people there? And Corey Hack has now come out. Now, the other thing is anybody that comes out of the pits now with 1 lap to go is on their hard tyre and they're cold. I'm on my soft tyres and they're up to temperature, they're in peak operating temperature, and of course we know the tyre wear in this race is not that high at all. So my soft tyres, you can basically still set personal best laps at the end of the race on the soft tyres. So we've got a very significant advantage on Corey at this point. So it's going to be pretty easy to get past, but it of course is the last lap, so Corey's going to be doing everything he can to try and defend this position, and he has the right to do that. He's only got 1 lap to go, so it is possible for him to try and hold that position even with this very, very significant tyre disadvantage. But then coming through here, I'm looking for this move at the Fugner, but he covers me off again, and then he runs me tight, but he runs deep. Textbook cut back there, textbook switchback move into Lafugner chicane, and we managed to get that done. So he's just exceeded his braking capability ever so slightly there, and we're able to get that move quite easily done, and we get the power down very, very well out of campus, out of turn 14, up the back straight at this point, and I think we are going to be able to hold position. 4th position after starting 17th on the grid. A couple of people have either quit or disconnected, and we're only down to 17 players at this point, but as Metal Gear finishes, we're only 16 seconds behind him, and I say only because I could quite easily be a lot bigger. And if we have a look at the total number of laps, 13 laps, so just over 1 second per lap. We lost to Metal Gear, but I would say that is a pretty successful race. That is, I'll completely say it, that was an absolute monster drive. I felt absolutely at one with my Audi R18 to come across the line with 256 points. Quite a good result. I'm quite happy with that. I will say the only reservation I have is if I got a better grid position, I think I could have had 3rd. I think I could have matched codes. Because I had a look in the replay of his lap times and he was setting 158s, 159s, a couple of 157s. I was setting 157s and 156s in that race. So I definitely felt as though if I did not mess my qualifying up, if I started higher up and had a similar race, I probably could have only had 3rd. So I was tossing up whether to actually go again, but I decided that the 3rd and final split of the night probably wouldn't have high enough points for me to better that result there. So 256 is quite a good result. It's in the realm of what I would consider to be a successful round, and the fact that I came from 17th up to 4th, gaining 13 positions, I consider that a success. So that's where I left it. But anyway, what a night. What an absolute cracker of a race, I would say. Spa always brings up good racing, so every time Spa comes up, I know, man, the racing is going to be good, and that's exactly what we got. But that's going to finish up this one today, so do hit that like button if you enjoyed, and do subscribe if you'd like to see more videos from me. Leave a comment as well. Questions, comments, constructive criticism, as always, very much appreciated. But that's the end of this one today, and that means that is it from me. So once again, I do thank you very much for watching. See you later.